Welcome to the Hustler's Guide to Flow. I'm your host, Marcia Miyake, and I'm taking you into the minds of some of the most incredible leaders in the medical, research, business, and yes, even spiritual fields to equip you with powerful insights and practical strategies to level up in business and in life. The next level version of yourself starts now. I had so much fun talking with former professional football player turned mindset consultant and high performance coach, Keyen Lage, that I had to invite him back on the show today to talk about the importance of balancing masculine and feminine energy in our relationships. We talk about how doing the deep work of unlearning who we are not is always a starting point for personal transformation, and what to consider in a coach if you feel called to work with one. Okay, welcome back, Keyen, to the show. I had to bring you back because I felt like our conversation was flowing yesterday and I actually just didn't want it to stop. So thank you so much for making the time to come back.
Absolutely. I was more than happy to, and I could not agree more. The flow was real last night or last morning for you.
Depending where you are in the world.
Yeah, right. Depending where you're at. It was 24 hours ago from today, so it was that good. We came on real quick.
Yeah, it was awesome. Okay, so yesterday we discussed how women tend to go into their masculine and how that in the end leads them to burnout and how it's not sustainable in their professional life, but also the impact that it has on their personal life in regards to their love and relationships in that. So I'd really love to get into now, what does that look like for the man? Like when the man is in a situation like that, what that creates. So can we start having a conversation around the masculine? I feel like we didn't really touch on that. And I think those are two really important pieces to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to dive into that. And first thing I would like to do is say that when a woman is, let's say, not in deep in her feminine, she doesn't necessarily cause a man to change. She just exposes what's really there, which can be really powerful. It can actually cause a lot of growth on both their sides of being able to grow together, which can create a very, very strong bond in the end, both of you working towards trying to take from the other back what's naturally yours in a sense, right? You're like trying to learn from each other. I can speak from experience with myself and in attracting that type of relationship where I was unconsciously craving certain levels of the masculinity that she had, and she was craving certain levels of some feminine parts that I had. And so that's why we are such a great match. But it's been a process of then transferring the more feminine traits of me to her and the more masculine traits back to me. So it can be a very, very powerful thing, but ultimately things to look for in that more wounded masculine when you do attract a man, especially a lot of these very successful, earthly successful women, is that they're very attracted to guys with a lot of earthly success. And the problem with that is that a lot of these guys are actually just building this foundation around them of earthly success and making money to cover up a lot of deeper insecurities. And so when some of these more masculine women get into a relationship with some of these guys, they actually end up exposing them big time and realize that, hey, like they're not this truly masculine guy that I thought he was, even though it looks like it from afar. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that with some of my more successful, very forward-thinking entrepreneur clients of mine that are women, and have attracted that in men where it's like the sexy thing on the outside. It's like, oh, he's this guy that I can change and I can, I see him doing all these crazy things, making money, and I'll be the one to make him settle down. But in reality, they get into the relationship and they're like, whoa, like this is not what I thought that I signed up for. And it's actually them taking control instead of the man, and ends up being this big jumbled mess. But like I said, there can be a lot of power if you do have two very conscious people that are aware of their natural tendency to favor towards the opposite sex's ways of being. And then you can actually grow together in that process, which, like I said, was an example of my relationship.
That totally resonated with me because I feel the same with my relationship, that we have strong tendencies to the opposite. So I have some masculine tendencies that I work on kind of calming down. I don't know what the term would be, but just stepping more into the feminine, and Dan too. And we're both really aware of it. And it's really good because, as you said, when you can work together, it really helps you to grow.
picked up on another thing that you said was that men sometimes, and this isn't just men, but will create a lot of success around them to cover up insecurities. And I think that that's been really true for me in the past, where I have met people that I thought were, had their shit together. I was like, whoa, this guy is amazing. And then behind closed doors is this really sensitive, vulnerable, wounded child that when I would, and again, I have to own my role in it, in not being in my feminine and calling them out on things. Like, no one likes to be called out, especially men. But I would find myself calling them out on things that were just like so out of alignment and like not in within integrity, and all of things that they were doing that I perceived was not authentic in their life. And they would completely go into this wounded attack phase because they are not used to having that from having this really worldly success, like very successful. No one ever questioned him, like the top of the organization. And then to come home to a partner who was in, at the time, her wounded feminine, and would be all like yelly and screamy and things like this, and call him out on where I thought his blind spots were, really revealed that he wasn't where I thought he was emotionally and psychologically in his development. So I think that's really important to know, that just because people look like they have their stuff together, or they worldly and earthly success, does not equate to inner fulfillment and true success from my perspective. So I think that was really cool. And can you talk more on the why women think that we can be the woman that helps them change? Because I see this a lot, where clearly there are signs that the man is not ready to settle down, or he hasn't shown enough genuine interest in the woman. He's not making bold moves, in my opinion. And you can give me your perspective on it too, because I'd love to hear. But I feel like if a guy truly wants to be with you, I feel like he's gonna stand up and make changes. And if he's not making those changes, I think you should look at potentially he just is not that into you. And so, yeah, like, do you see that as well with women thinking like hanging on to the one word that he says and like that's going to be his commitment, or they're just like reading too much into some of his actions and thinking that that's his way of saying that he really loves her, when he's not actually saying it, but maybe it means this? And like, what are your thoughts on that? And do you see that too?
Yeah, that's a very complex question. There's a lot of moving parts to it. But to answer your first question about why women think that they can change men or be the one that changes them, is because I think it's kind of biological. Like, women are biologically created to crave and seek an alpha male. And what that was, thousands of years ago, was somebody that was able to get all the girls, able to show a level of success above everybody else as far as what was important in society during that time. So I would just say biologically, women are naturally created to crave that and look for that. So I wouldn't say inherently that it's bad or that it's terrible, but I would say that there is something to be said about putting the blinders up to certain red flags that may be there. Now, it's a very interesting dynamic, though, when you have two people that are a little wounded, because you have one person, like I would say, like the guy, who's looking for an extra level of maybe trust and acceptance from the more like maybe alpha woman that he's not getting. And the woman is looking for a certain level of commitment from the guy that he's not willing to give, because he doesn't see a certain level of trust in the female and where he's at, right? So it's like you got two people where your insecurities are playing off each other and magnifying each other. And that leads for a very difficult and tough situation, because there has to be some give somewhere, and the interesting part is like, it's not even that the male doesn't really want to commit. I believe a lot of times the male does, but there's certain parts of him that need to have certain things checked off a list. And some of it's not even real expectations, right? It's too much. And so they create this expectation that could, a lot of times males compare a woman to their mom, and they see a certain level of just like straight love from their mom. So they're looking for that from their significant other, but their mom wasn't actually being honest with her emotions. So guys weren't able to see the other side of their mother. So they end up comparing their potential significant other to their mom, which isn't even a real expectation to be able to do. So there's so many different moving parts, and we could dive into the complexities of all that. But ultimately, when you give yourself that permission to work deeper on yourself and unlearn who you're not, you will then attract somebody that's in the same position. And you are capable of doing it with a significant other. I can tell you it's a very painful at times, but holy shit, the amount of growth that I've been able to have in myself and the amount of demons I've forced myself to have to confront, to be the man that I need to be for myself. Oh my gosh, unbelievable, unbelievable, firsthand. It's been phenomenal seeing that. It's maybe not as easy as other relationships where two people have done the work and they come together and it's a little more easy, but it's very interesting dynamics when you get the wounded feminine and the wounded masculine together, because that can just create a huge shitstorm, or it can create something beautiful if they both have the understanding that they're trying to attain what the other has during that time and do it together. That's actually where a beautiful bond can form if it's made through. If you guys work through it together, then because you went through that struggle together, that's what creates bonds, right? Is those difficult times going through with somebody else. So you either end up very hurt in a sense, or it could end up very beautiful because the bond that's been built through that process of being able to take back what's rightfully yours in both situations.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So, and I was talking about how the man that looks like he has everything. I don't want to say that I'm saying it's across the board, guys. I may have misspoke there. I'm saying that some people that look like they have their stuff together may not. And so basically don't judge a book by its cover. Just because it looks like their life is together doesn't mean they've got their emotional life together. And on conversely as well, at the end of the day, women, we want to feel safe. And sometimes it's the guy that doesn't have the best car and that doesn't have, all the properties and this, really crazy career that is going to make you feel safest. So I think when you do a little bit of that healing work yourself, I know for me, I could tell a part of it was a wounding thing that I wanted to be with this guy that was really successful and all that. And now I look back on Mars at that stage with a lot of compassion and no judgment, but a realization that there was a little wounding there, and there was a little of positioning yourself to be with someone significant. But when you feel whole in yourself, you feel less pulled to do something like that. And also you're able to honor the man in front of you. And sometimes the man in front of you and the man that is going to be the most solid rock and really that strong superhero in your life may not have those earthly things that you think your dream guy needs to have. So I really wanted to throw that in there because that's been a learning for me. And I share that almost with some embarrassment that that's how I used to think. But I feel like maybe someone needs to hear that. And that, just the more you work on yourself, the less you will feel like a guy needs to tick all these really ridiculous boxes. And you were saying, it was making me laugh, we're comparing to your girlfriend or to your mother is really unfair because your mom loved you in a different way. I look at my son and he can do no wrong. I hope I do a good job of showing him how to treat women so he doesn't think that all women are going to treat him like I do. You know what I mean? That's so unfair to the woman. So I thought that was really interesting. That was cool.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate you doing that because I think a lot of people did need to hear that. And to be honest with you, I would make the argument that the reason why many men are in the high up, very successful positions that they're in, maybe younger in their career, is because they were coming from such a place of lack. And if you actually did not do the internal work before that, what I've found to be true is that's almost the case, I would say, nearly every time, to be honest with you, unless they have already done a lot of that work underneath. Most of the time, it's them getting to where they need to be, having a ton of success because they feel like they needed that for the validation to feel good about themselves, which is why they got to that place in the first place. So and the next thing I'd like to say is that there's something very powerful in being able to come together with somebody and helping them reach their full potential. You and your situation, you talked about, maybe if he doesn't have all the properties, he doesn't have all the money, doesn't have all those things, maybe you can actually be in the position where you can show your man love and compassion to empower him to reach his full potential, right? Because a man's going to be on his path and do his thing. And if you can be the one that's behind the scenes, that's where we're hey, baby, you got this. And so you heal certain parts of him emotionally through that unconditional love that you're showing. Now it's earned throughout a relationship. It's not something that's just given all up front. Not to say that, but and even too with the man, like giving a woman the ability to be able to be in a position where she feels comfortable enough to be able to do her own thing and feel like she's okay with that, right? So there's something very powerful in two people coming together in that instance and building each other up and really like pushing each other to be that version. But that can't come without some arguments and without some fights, because like everybody that says, oh, it's been 6 months, we haven't had an argument. Well, I would argue that your relationship is built off masks, because that's not real. You can think that it is, but eventually the chickens will come to roost and you'll have to confront some shit that needs to be confronted. And I've seen that too, when there is so much money involved or success that like, hey, we're traveling, we're doing this, it's extravagant, we don't have to confront any of our problems because we have money and it's fantastic. Not to demonize money, right? That's the last thing I want to do is demonize money. Because money can provide a lot of very powerful, amazing things for ourselves, but also the world, right? So it's the last thing I want to do. But in the instance when you gain the money before you do the internal work, it can be used just as it was the reason why you got it in the first place, which is to mask insecurities. So you can use money in certain situations to prevent both of you from having to confront some deeper insecurities. In the context of a relationship, we're traveling, everything's great, it's romantic, we're in Rome, we're in France, we're doing all of this, it's great. But what happens when like something out of the norm happens where your money can't fix that problem? Then insecurities come out, right? So it can be a very actually scary thing a lot of the times, gaining certain levels of earthly success before some of the work's done, because then some of the things that you should be force yourself to confront, you're not able to, or you're not forced to, because money can be a band-aid to prevent you from experiencing that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 1,000%. Because I think a lot of people think that their life will be better with money. And of course, agreed with you that it can give you choices, it can give you a level of freedom, and that's awesome. However, when the money comes before your own growth, that's when I don't see long-term fulfillment in that. Eventually, like I always say, eventually you need to do the work. Eventually it'll come to a point where you need to do the work, because the money will only cover up so much. And you're so right that it's used like a mask. It's used as to hide the insecurities, but eventually everything comes to the light. That's like a universal law. Everything eventually comes to the light, and then you kind of have to face it. So love that totally. So let's talk about, how does a guy go about attracting his woman? What kind of energy should he be giving off? Like, who does he need to become to attract that feminine woman?
I would give the same answer as if you were asking it for the woman being able to embody her higher self as her truest version, which is unlearning who he's not. That's how you do it. So it's not a matter of like, who does he need to become or who does she need to become? It's a matter of both of them unlearning who they are not, which is all the masks that they've had to put on throughout the years to present themselves in a way where they're accepted, or they feel like they'll be accepted by everybody else around them. So the more you're able to unlearn who you're not, the more you're able to step into your truest essence, which is a male being able to step into his predominantly masculine place, and the female being able to step into her predominantly feminine place naturally. We talked about it last night, where one of my clients, we didn't even address her negative perception surrounding her body. And then through just doing some other internal work, she did some retail therapy and felt much better about her body and being able to feel comfortable just to buy some clothes that were more than just a secondhand store. She felt really good about herself. And not to say that she needed that to feel good about herself, but she naturally stepped into more of that feminine place where she's like, hey, like, I kind of want clothes that are more than just secondhand because I deserve it and I want it. Not to say that she gets her value off that, but that's what she wanted, essentially. So stepping into her femininity just through doing the work of unlearning who she wasn't. And I said that just because it's important to be able to justify what I said for how people are able to step into that place. But simply unlearning who you're not, and you'll naturally step into, as males, the more masculine, as females, the more feminine.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. I love how, again, you brought it back there, because I do have that tendency. I love how you ruled me in of, well, then what do we need to do? Right. And I think a lot of people want that, but it's not about what do we need to do and who do we need to become. It's about unlearning those unhelpful patterns and beliefs that we were conditioned to. So I love that. So let's talk about how if I'm in my, because we talked about this a bit on the last episode where we're talking about how the woman is, if she's in her wounded feminine or she tries to put on a masculine mask, what does that then cause in the relationship, or what does that reveal in the man? Like, how does the man typically show up, or how is he triggered? What does that do to a man when the woman is really too far in the masculine role in the relationship, or even in the courting stage?
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a phenomenal question. And I like that you said to a man, but I would also argue that she is just a mirror for him. So he's already in his wounded place. So you are attracting where you're at. The man that's wounded in your relationship because you're wounded, essentially, some of the tendencies that you'll find are that he'll feel like he's substantially lacking power in a lot of ways. And so what do men do when they're lacking power? They do what they can to try to regain the power that they know they want to have deep down. And what a lot of that looks like is not doing basic things around the house that their woman asks of them by rebelling against it. No, I'm not going to take out the trash because you're a bitch to me, so I'm not going to take out the trash, right? Or, it can be as bad as, going and watching a bunch of porn, right? Guys will do that to make themselves feel better, feel like they're in power, or go hook up with somebody else to feel like they're in power again. So never to justify that type of behavior in a sense, but when you're acting in your, I shouldn't even say acting, when you're being in your wounded feminine place, it's going to trigger those types of things in the wounded masculine, just as a byproduct of that dynamic, because a male is meant to feel empowered. And if he's not feeling that, he'll go find somewhere where he can. And a lot of the times it's in a very unhealthy place that men do that, because they don't know how to confront the situation or handle it. Like, they want to solve it, they want to figure it out, but they're at a place where they just feel like they can't. So they'll do what they can to either get out of the house, always with the guys, drinking with the guys all the time. Like I said, they won't go do the chores that the girl asked them to do, or, they're jerking off the porn all the time, or hooking up with somebody else, right? So all those activities are all forms of a man trying to take back his power in a sense.
So that makes so much sense. What do you think then is for the woman's part? So if she's not feeling protected in the man, let's say she is in her masculine and she's wanting him to protect her and kind of be that safe strength that she can go to, but he's not because she's in her wounded. What does then, that cycle, what is her response to him stepping into his masculine and running off and doing these things? Like, how would her response be?
That is an amazing question. I think it's super relevant too for anybody listening, because then you can just become aware, like, wow, like maybe I am struggling with this. Maybe I do have this, because a lot of people, no, I don't have that. Or like, oh no, I'm fine. Like, I don't have this. So if this resonates with you, then you probably are dealing with a wounded version of your natural highest way of being. But what happens a lot with women is that they simply lose interest in the man. And they're like, oh, okay, well, this guy, he can't take care of me. He's not on his path. He's not doing his thing. So it's not very attractive to me because he's sacrificing his life for me. And you see it a lot with guys that they give up everything for the girl, and the girl in the moment thinks that's what she wants. It's like, oh, I know, just stay with me. Just stay with me. Like, stay in bed with me all day. And you think that's what you want, but then the guy does that, and it happens every day. And eventually the guy stops going to the gym. He stops doing things that he loves to do. And you stop being attracted to him. Like, oh, what's going on? Like, I'm not as attracted to him anymore. He's doing everything that I want. This isn't making any sense, right? Because actually you don't want him to do everything that you think that you wanted to do. You don't want him to do that, no matter how much you think that you want him to be your slave, because then you will lose interest, and you will start to, as men do, look elsewhere when you feel like you're not protected, right? When men feel like they're not in a position of power, they look elsewhere. When women feel like they're not protected, they look elsewhere. So you might start to find yourself, looking elsewhere, fantasizing about other guys that you feel like can fulfill that level of protection for yourself. But ultimately, yeah, I think the biggest point to get across is that like women listening to this, they might think that they want their man to do everything for them in regard to him sacrificing his own life for them. But you really don't, because if you haven't already, you're going to hit a point where you're not attracted to him anymore, or that the attraction will start to lower. You'll sort of feel yourself like become less comfortable around him, or not comfortable at all. And that's simply because he's not in his position where he's on his path and staying true to himself, not telling you no. Women love to be told no, unconsciously.
Oh my God.
Right?
That is
Baby, I
so
love
true.
you. Baby, I love you. But right now, I got to go do this thing. And you're like, I hate you because I want you to lay with me right now, but okay.
It,
Okay.
it's
You do your
so
thing.
true. You hit the nail on the head because I have seen this in my friends' relationships and, in my past relationships as well, where you've trained your little puppy to do all the things you want, and then you realize that you're not really feeling your little puppy anymore. And at the end of the day, we think we want all of the attention and our ego wants it, but our soul doesn't want that. Our soul wants a strong, powerful being so that we can be strong, powerful beings in our own way. And I have seen that so much. So, because I'm actually thinking of another situation where, do you think that also causes more fights, even though the guy is doing everything, or is there an underlying resentment to the relationship? It's like the underlying tone of the relationship is resentment because the guy's always doing what she wants. And here's the other thing, even if the guy is doing everything that she wants, a lot of the times she's not doing it at her level or the way she wants him to do it. So there's another level of shame to that he's bending over backwards and sacrificing his life to do everything for her, but then she's also like, oh, but he still does this. And so there's like that, where's that coming from? That nitpicky energy of like, he's doing it, but like, is that because she's just losing attraction now? And she's just like, now he can do no right because he's been trying to do all the right by her. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And once again, it's a phenomenal question. I think it's the same thing as what men might do with success. Men might think that I'm going to keep trying to get more and try to get more. Then when I get some success, well, like, okay, that felt good, but it's not enough. I need to have more. I need to have more. I need to have more. I think women might do that in the sense of favor or time and attention from their man because they think that they want all of this time. They want to spend every waking hour together. But then when they start to get it, it's like, oh, okay, like that felt good, but I want more. No, I want more, right? It's going down that path of thinking that it's going to make you feel better, but it's really not. And what's happening is he's getting further and further and further away from being in alignment with himself. And not, this thing is, I don't want to put all the blame on the feminine at all. Like that's the masculine's fault. Like that's his problem that he has to deal with in himself, that he's allowing that to happen in his life, where he's losing himself because he was never found in a sense. But regardless, I want to put the blame where it needs to be on the man in a sense. But yeah, that's the reason why it's like, oh, I'm not satisfied. He needs to do more. Well, it's because you don't really actually want him to do what you think you want him to do. So you're seeking for more and more and more. It's like a drug, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's like a drug. Like I do one hit and I'm like, oh, I'm high. And then next time I need 2 more hits. Like, oh, okay, well now I need more and more and more. And it's never going to give you what you're looking for.
You're never going to get like how you were the first high. It's like the law of diminishing returns. Like it wears down. It becomes the high or the hit you get from it. I love how we're using like drug.
Yeah, it's a great example. It's a great example.
Yeah. You don't get that same, hit that you had the first time. So I can see why that would just eventually get into a really unhelpful like relationship dynamic. So what about in the dating game? Like I'm not with a partner and I'm looking to attract this like alpha male, this man who's really in his masculine so that I can feel safe. I want to be that really feminine person, but I'm not really in my essence. Can you talk into that? Like, how does that work?
Are you ready for it?
Yeah.
Unlearn who you're not. That's the best answer I can give, because in that position, like so many people are in so many different places and levels in their life. And to give one answer, like as far as like, hey, just do this thing, or hey, like if you just do this, then you'll attract the guy, but you might attract the guy, you might get him into your life, but ultimately your vibration isn't actually in alignment with what you're portraying yourself to be. So eventually you'll have to answer to that lack of vibrational alignment, right? So that's the part that kind of sucks, but is kind of cool at the same time about the mental masturbation stuff. It's like, oh, if I just embody this, or if I just do this, then that'll make me more this. It doesn't really work that way. And eventually the masks will come off and you will get exposed as far as where you're really at in your process. And that person's going to recognize and be like, whoa, you are not who you portrayed yourself to be. I'm out.
Yes, totally. And what you said about the energy piece. So because if you're out looking for this person and you want to be the feminine and you want to attract the masculine, but your energy is not in the feminine, it's like, I don't know how to describe it, but for me, sometimes I can just be around someone and I can feel their energy. That's because I'm really connected to it. But I think even subliminally and subconsciously, people can pick up on people's energy without them even saying a word. I remember back in the day, I was so insecure that I wouldn't talk to anybody, but the energy that I was giving off was, do not talk to me, do not come near me. And I remember in university, people used to say when they would get to know me, you are so nice. I'm like, oh, okay. And they're like, from looking at you, we thought you were the biggest bitch. But once you get to know you, you're just a really loving person. And I was like, wow, okay, so that's the energy that I'm giving off. So I think that's important to know, is that we can want to be these things, but it's like you said, the unlearning bit is, what is the energy of it? The underlying is your energy that you're giving off. And for a long time, I had this really standoffish energy. And that was just me being a wounded woman and not having done the work. So do you think there's an element of that in just relationships, where you can't even come in proximity to the right guy because your energy is just so not in alignment with that masculine, because you're not in that place, you're not in that healed place. And so that guy that you want, that strong, but who's done the work and this and that, you're not even in vibrational alignment. So you guys can't even come into proximity. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you'll definitely repel that unless you get really good at reading a lot of books and embodying what you think it is to be the true feminine. So you actually, your external appearance can actually attract that person, which is kind of fascinating. But like I said, eventually you'll have to answer to that difference in the vibrational alignment. So then he'll, if in that position, will expose you, and you try to this at him, and he might be like, no, I'm not dealing with that. I'm out. That's not what I thought. Sorry. See ya. And he won't answer to that.
Oh my gosh. I love that you brought the appearance into it, because it's so true. I think sometimes people think that being in the feminine is about how you appear. There's a lot of women that are in the masculine who look so feminine, beautiful, eye candy, where guys are like, oh my gosh. And then there is women who are a lot more understated and, aren't that oh my gosh, drop dead gorgeous girl, but they are so in their feminine, and you can see the men around them because they are just so in their feminine. And the opposite is true of men. Sometimes you see this jacked guy and you're like, oh, because we think muscles equal strong. No, just because he's ripped doesn't mean he could be the biggest mama's boy and just need to be, taken care of all the time and not in his healthy masculine. So I love that you brought that into it, because I think, there's thing oh, if I'm just the piece and just do my hair and makeup and I'll attract the guy, and that's going to last you a minute or two. And and then you guys,
and then he'll realize,
and
then it'll be whoa, no, right? And then that's the difference between self-care and self-love right there, though, too, right? The perception of there's been this thing that's self-care and self-love are kind of the same thing. Self-care is just taking care of that external appearance, and which is important, absolutely. And then self-love is actually doing that internal deep work. And a lot of people mistaken, doing self-care and thinking that's enough to make up for the lack of self-love that you truly have for yourself. And self-love is really just giving yourself the permission to unlearn who you're not. That's what real self-love is. And so it's not this bullshit definition of what everybody thinks it is as far as the self-care stuff. It's very different.
Oh, that's so interesting. I would even add another layer to that, because I also was I feel like something's not 100 here. So I think there's the self-love. And again, I'm thinking out loud, I actually haven't processed this, but there's the self-love of just loving who you are, knowing who you are. And then I would say self-care is being gentle with yourself and doing those things. Self-care could be reading a book, having a cup of tea. And then there's, I don't know if it would be self-care, but it's taking care of yourself physically, maintaining yourself. And I think that's where we think maintaining myself, I'll get my nails done, I'll get my hair done. And that all equates to self-care and self-love. And I think you're right. I think, no, that again, we're looking at the superficial. We're looking at the surface stuff and trying to make it have its roots, and it's never going to have its roots. You got to go back and do that really important work.
Definitely. And two, like what you said though, with the self-love, like accepting yourself and loving yourself, even go a step deeper and say, it's hard to love somebody that you don't even know who they are. And that's what everybody's trying to do. So even the people that are like, I love myself, I accept myself, I love this beautiful thing about me, I love that beautiful thing about me. Like, it doesn't work. It doesn't work unless you've actually unlearned who you're not. Because if you're in that position where you haven't unlearned who you're not yet, you're trying to say that you love somebody that you're not even that. And you as your higher self will recognize that. Your higher self's like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not even us. Like, the person that you think that you are right now, like, that's not even us. And so you're always going to have this battle inside. So you can, do all the mental masturbation in the world of saying, I love myself, I accept myself. Yes, it feels so good. But it doesn't really mean anything unless you've unlearned who you're not. Because your higher self will recognize and know that you're not actually loving you as your higher self. You're loving the masks that you put on, right? Which further solidifies the need and the love for the masks, which is actually counterproductive to you getting better. Woo, which is crazy.
Yeah, that was bombs right there. And like, that's one of the reasons I think people who've done the work say it doesn't work. It's because you were addressing what you were just saying. You were addressing your mask. You were trying to love that mask. And then because those processes that you did didn't work, it's because you hadn't gone deep enough to the core of who you are. And as you said, your highest self will not take it. Eventually, it's gonna pull up the curtain, expose everything, and then you have to eventually do the work. Like, that's what I love, that there's so many people in the coaching space. I feel like we're moving, the whole global consciousness is rising, and we're seeing a lot more coaches and people like healers and people in the space really trying to serve. But what I would say, guys, is when you're looking for someone to guide you on your journey, because that's all we really do is just guide you on your journey to help you find your truest self, reveal your truest self, remember who you truly are, is make sure that the person can take you to your core and
can give you a little elbow. They got to be able to give you a little elbow, because our consciouses, right, they don't want to change. And if you have somebody that's like, you're doing great, just keep going. You're doing great, just keep going. It's going to further solidify your mask, and it's actually going to make you worse. And you might temporarily feel a little better, but it's going to make you feel worse. Now, it's not to say that you need to have somebody that's a huge dick all the time either, right? But you got to have somebody that's going to be able to meet you where you are at. Right. And if there's the times, right, that there needs to be that tough conversation, they're willing to have it with you. They're willing to have it and say, hey, this is happening. Right. But this isn't right. Right now, into being able to position it, it's able to resonate with them. So you as a good, great coach, you're able to kind of sneak in there, right, and meet them where they're at and get while their brain's not really in a place of following you, and distract the conscious brain. And then you get to the unconscious and you plug something in. I could go on for that forever, but really, being able to have somebody that can call you on your shit, because so many people are afraid to do that, especially healers, people that are coaches. They care so much about people that a lot of the times it's not their care for people that causes them not to be able to be honest and truthful with the other person, but it's their own insecurities in themselves they haven't dealt with. So a lot of coaches, they haven't dealt with their own shit, even though they have all the mental masturbation in the world. Real quick, I want to say something too, real quick, Marcia, is I refer to the mental masturbation a lot, and there is a time and place for it, but it's once the internal work has been done. So then that matters, rather than the technical stuff. The mental masturbation, oh, okay, well, that's how you do that thing. Oh, that makes sense. Like the masculine feminine, it's like, oh, well, that's what that looks like. Oh, okay, that makes sense now, right? So I'm like a blank slate, and now I can embody these things. But if you haven't done the unlearning, then the mental masturbation doesn't really do a whole lot for you. So I refer to that a lot, but I really wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for that clarification. And you were saying that some coaches, they're not able to give you that sometimes not so gentle nudge and making you do the work and go deeper. And I think that's for a couple of reasons. I'm just going to hypothesize here. But one of the reasons sometimes is because they, as you said, haven't done the work. And so they may not want to upset you because they want to keep you as a client. And so they're in self-preservation rather than making you go do the work so that you can have the biggest transformation. There are times to be gentle with your clients, and there are times where I know that I need to just pick them up. And then there's some times where I need to be harder on them and say, we need to do this process. We need to do this deeper work. And on that, and I think this is like the most important point that I want to make on this specific coaching bit, is that we cannot take people where we haven't gone ourselves, i.e. there's a lot of coaches out there that are doing great work in terms of like, I can help you reach 6-7 figures, I can do this and and all that stuff. And then there's coaches like, I can help you do that. But a lot of the times, the reason we are not reaching our goals is because we don't believe we're worthy of it. You know, we will never out earn our inner child. So if we haven't healed that inner child and we haven't done that work, then I can give you all the 6-7 figure strategies that you want, but you're not going to actually get there. So you need a coach that has done that deep work, that has done deep healing work on themselves, because how are they meant to hold your hand? I cannot take my clients anywhere that I haven't been. So it's made me really step up my game in terms of my healing, because that's where I specialize in. And then, of course, yes, as you were saying, and using your term, you can do the mental masturbation after you have done that deep healing work. So what I would say on that, and you know, you and I have been vibing. We like literally just came into each other's energy fields for like recently. And I love the work that you're doing, and I love that you're doing the deep work. And I think when it comes to finding a coach, you need to find a coach like Keyen, someone who is really committed to doing that inner work, because you need that foundation. And then you go do the business coaching, and then you do all the other coaching that you feel you need to do to take your business to the next level or to whatever. But you need to have that foundation, or everything you try to build on top of it is going to crumble. I have seen it happen. I've seen it happen to myself. I've seen it happen to my friends and my clients. You have to go back and do that work. So important.
100%. And I think the beautiful part too, when you do find somebody, and it's kind of the same thing. It's like, okay, well, how do I find somebody that I know has done the work? And that's honestly difficult. It is. Like, I can see how that would be tough, just because, like you said, there is more and more people entering the coaching space. I mean, it's becoming more and more saturated because people are selling people on a dream to make money. And if you're getting into the coaching space because you want to make money just for yourself, then you're in it for the wrong reason. And I think that's a huge problem, is that there are so many people like, hey, you want to make 6 figures a month, just be a coach. And you're teaching people how to make money being a coach, when all these people are so fixated on making the money that they lose sight of what it is and the responsibility associated with being a coach. It's a huge responsibility. That's why I don't even really like to associate with the name coach, because of kind of the negative connotation that I know a lot of people have given to it, at least in my own experience. But the really interesting part too is when you do find somebody that is committed to working on themselves and unlearning who they're not, you actually, like, all the other areas of your life, so like the relationships, your business, you as your overall joy and happiness in yourself, all those things actually get better when you work on the core of what's happening. And now your potential for that may only be as high as your level of skill that you have, like the mental masturbation stuff, like learning how to run a business properly. But really, like, if you already had that skill, at least what I found with many of my clients is like they regress a little bit in their business, just because a lot of the foundation was stuff that had to be moved and restructured, but they actually end up having more success and making more money working less when they do the internal work of unlearning who they're not, which is fascinating in itself. We can have a whole nother topic conversation about that, right? But that's it right there. You don't need all these other different coaches for all these different spaces. When you learn to unlearn who you're not, then it's the easy part.
I would agree with that. And that was actually even the case with me when I started delving into personal development. I already had like a really good career. But the more I went in and really focused on building up who I am and discovering myself, really learning to love myself, I actually wasn't focused at all on my business. Like, I was working in corporate at the time, had a good job and everything. But because I was so committed to me and just growing me, that I literally picked up my head and opportunities were coming to me. Like, the career was taking care of itself because I was taking care of me. And I talk about that all the time, because it was such a transformational time in my life where I literally was not focused on the goal. There was no business goal. There was like, okay, I'm going to go to work every day. My goal was, I'm going to go to work every day and I'm going to give it my best. That's it. I'm going to come home and I'm going to do the work. I would do all of this work on myself. And, obviously hired coaches and things like this. But my goal was not, I need to, become this type of earner and I need to have this. There was no goal around that. The goal was just get to know Mars, love Mars for who I truly am. And it literally, as you were saying, like, it will just fall into place because a lot of these people already have the skills and there's just like this mental and energy blocks that just need to get cleared through to actually take them to the next level. So I would totally agree with that.
100%. And I think something really beautiful that we can give to the people listening too, if you don't want to reach out to Marcia or myself, as far as some things to look for maybe in a potential great coach, if you don't feel pulled to reach out to either one of us, is somebody that just like is consistent with their words, right? Like a lot of coaches will say that, hey, like you can trust me, like I'm here for you, like I'll be there for you. But like, are they actually demonstrating that, right? Like if they say, hey, you're not just a number, do you feel like you're not just a number, right? And if you don't, you're able to helpfully have that conversation with them. And if they don't give you the space to be able to do that, then they're not somebody that's frankly confident enough in themselves to be able to work with you. That's probably one of the biggest things that I have with all my clients is like, because insecurities come up. Like say, oh, it's payment number 2. Oh no, like I'm feeling insecure. And it's just like, hey, like, let's have that conversation, right? Like you're feeling this way. Great. Hey, you're feeling like, you're getting a lot of results, but you're kind of afraid right now because the results that you're getting. Let's have that conversation. Right? Let's do that. Like, I'm not going to demonize you. I'm not going to like bypass your emotions, how you're feeling, because that shit's real. Right. And that's where a lot of the growth actually happens in those moments when we can have that open dialogue where we can just communicate back and forth and just be real about where we're at. Mm-hmm. Right? If you don't have that with a coach, I've seen with a lot of people that I've worked with is in the past, they've had coaches where it's just like, oh, well, I wasn't getting this. And, I thought I would get this. And eventually there was so much miscommunication that it just fell out. Well, it's because your coach didn't provide them the space to be able to open up and do that. That's a coach's job. It's not your fault. Mm-hmm. It's not your fault.
Yeah, I would agree. Right? I've experienced that as well with coaches where, I've invested big dollars and, the beginning was really good. They were really interested. And then by the end, it was kind of like I was not important anymore. So to add to what Keyen's saying, I think to know if you're looking at the deep work, there's kind of like two things to consider is, do you feel a connection with this person? Like, do you feel like this person is genuine? And I think you can just kind of feel that with people. Like this person feels genuine. Like if you feel at all like an icky feeling from the person, do not give them your money. Mm-hmm. And in regards to the work that they do, what I find is a really good question to ask is just ask them like, oh, what kind of work have you done on yourself? Now, don't be looking for like a bunch of certifications. If they give it, awesome. But what you're actually looking for is the type of response that they give you.
There it is.
If it's triggered the F out of them, either they haven't done the work or they're not confident in their skills or they really haven't done the stuff that they're pretending to have done. But if they can like, because like for real, like if I were to hire like an energy healer or something like that, and I reached out and they're like, hey, what kind of work have you done? And they're like, oh, hey, and they did beautiful energy about them. And they were like, I spent, several years doing this, and it might not have been a qualification or a training, but if I feel like my energy is good about them, like I'm going to follow that. But if they're like, you know what I mean? If they're like standoffish or something about, that's going to give you a signal in terms of like, do you actually want to work with this person? So that's what I would add to looking for a coach.
That's it. I think that's perfect. What we shared, like not even going any more than that, like especially what you said, that response and how they come back to you will be the determining factor for sure. That's like it right there. Like that's it. That just feels like, yes, that's it.
Awesome. Well, Keyen, I have loved both of our conversations so much. You are just such, like, I feel like our energies just go, and I love just everything that you're saying and what you stand for and how you're really calling people to do the work. Now, I already asked you what, we've already just had an interview where I asked you what you want your legacy to be. So what are just like some final words you want to leave the listeners with before we go?
It's like, give yourself that permission to reach out to somebody. If you have not consciously done the work, there is work to be done. Right? So if you're sitting there wondering, you're like, oh, well, maybe I have something, maybe I don't. If you haven't consciously done the unlearning, you do. And that's actually the thing that's telling you that you need to, is you telling yourself that you don't need to, which is kind of interesting in itself. But just give yourself that permission to at least just like reach out to somebody, and have a conversation. You don't have to go 3, 4, 5 steps down the road. Like, oh, well, what happens if this happens? Or what are we going to do 5 months from now? What happens if that? Just reach out to them. Just like shoot them a message. And if it's meant to work in the way it feels like it's supposed to, then it'll lead to another conversation. It'll lead to a greater conversation, and it'll just flow into place, right? It will, right? But just give yourself that permission.
Okay, guys, I hope you got some powerful takeaways from this episode. If so, please share it with someone. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe and review, as it helps us to spread our message of inspiration. Sending you so much love, and I'll see you on the next episode of The Hustler's Guide to Flow.